All right, Rabosai, good morning, good morning. Let us begin. We have an incredibly beautiful and magnificent daf ahead of us today. 1 second. Okay, so Rabosai, begin by thanking all of our sponsors, to thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Kislev, to thank Josh and Becker Friedman for dedicating all the Shuman Drushos this month. Leilui Nishmas, Josh's father, Yisrael Yehuda, Ben Rav Chaim Raphael. To thank Sammy and Malka Esterson for dedicating all the Shurim and Drushos this month in memory of their parents, Yitzchak Leib Aaron Cohen, Sarah Rachel Bas Baruch Avram, Hinda Bas Hanech Ephraim, and in the schos of the continued Gezunt and Hatzlacha of Mr. Morton Esterson, Admeh Ve'esim Shanim Tovos. To thank the Pepper family for dedicating the Shurim and Drushos this month, the creation of the yard site of Yosef Pepper, Yosef David Zichron Lebracha Ben Yaakov. Our week of learning sponsors, Steve Golaskov, in creation of the first yard site of his father, Nachum Sender, Ben Meshulam Nassim. We hope that the Neshama has an Aliyah and the family a Nechama. And to thank Ayala and Sarah Steinberg for dedicating Yeshurim this week in the Schus for Refuah Shlema for Shulamis Bas Susha. I will say with that, let us begin. Baruch Hashem, a lot to do today. Incredibly, overwhelmingly beautiful Gemara. I will say today's daf is Nun. We are picking up Emir Hashem. Okay, we have a lot to do today. On Mem Testament base 49b, and we left off the last short line. Rabbi Huda Rabbi Shimon, so 49b right before the wide lines. Rabbi Huda Rabbi Shimon, Aisula Kamayo Belusfin. So we'll say Rabbi Huda and Rabbi Shimon are sitting, and ultimately again it was brought before them Belusfin. The Ran says, what are Belusfin? Min te'enim shekashin achal, a type of dates, a type of figs, that are difficult to digest. So what happened? Rabbi Huda achal, Rabbi Shimon lo achal. Rabbi Huda ate them. First white line, Rabbi Shimon did not eat them. Amar Rabbi Huda, my time lo achal mas. Rabbi Huda says, Rabbi Shimon, why are you not eating the dates? Amar Rabbi Shimon, elu ein yotzin b'mnei me'ayin kol ikr. These dates, they come in, they don't go out, right? They just sit in there. Amar Rabbi Huda, kol shekein shenismoch alayim machar givaldik. You know what that'll do? That saves us time from eating tomorrow. In other words, if they sit in you, that means we'll be satiated tomorrow as well, and it saves us some time. Incredible. Rabbi Huda v'Yosef kamed Rabbi Tarfon. Rabbi Huda was sitting before Rabbi Tarfon. Amar Rabbi Tarfon, hayom panecha tzuvim. So let's listen to this. So Rabbi Tarfon says to Rabbi Huda, your face looks radiant today. Right? Self-assured men could have these kind of conversations, right? Your face looks radiant today. Now, in all seriousness, what Rabbi Tarfon was saying to Rabbi Huda is, there's a glow to you. There's a glow to you today. So what's the pshat? So Amrlei emesh yatsu avadecha lasada. I'll tell you the truth. You know what happened? Yesterday, my servants went out to the field. Ve'viu lanu tradin. They brought back beets. V'achalnu b'lo melach. We ate the beets without salt. V'machalnu b'melach, and how we had the beets with salt. Kol shekain shahayu panenu tzuhuvin. All the more so, our faces would be even more radiant. So the idea being, Rabbi Huda attributed the glow to an enhanced diet. We had beets. The fresh beets ultimately were good for us. Amra hahi matronis Rabbi Huda. Let's listen to this. There was once a Roman noblewoman who said to Rabbi Huda, More v'ravi, you are clearly a man who is a teacher and a drunk. Okay, now why did she call him a teacher and a drunk? If you look at the Ran is on the right-hand side, about 8 lines up before the end. Again, Rabbi Huda had this beautiful, this radiant countenance. So he looked, I guess, maybe like a little rosy. So she said, you're a drunk. She knows he was known as a teacher of Torah, but she said, clearly, you're also a drunk. Amrleh, listen to this. Rabbi Huda said, Chas v'shalom, Hemenusa biyada dahi isisa. I swear, Ita'imna elikidusha va'avdalta va'arba kasi de pischa. Rabbi Huda says, I barely drink any wine. The only wine I drink is a cup of wine for Kiddush, a cup of wine for Havdalah, and the 4 kosos on Pesach. Right? That's the only wine I drink. And when I drink that, v'chograni tzidai min Pesach adatzeres. And when I drink, this specifically is referring to the Dalet kosos, the 4 cups of wine on Pesach, I get such a headache that I have a headache from Pesach up until Shavuos. That's how intense the headache is. Ella, so what do I attribute the complexion to? Chachmas Adam Ta'ir Panav. So we'll say this is so beautiful. Quoting over here the pasuk from Koheles, literally again, the wisdom of man will illuminate his face. So that which you see, that beautiful luminescent complexion, that's a reflection, or that right? That's literally a reflection of the Torah I have. So I'll say, what a beautiful idea that when we learn Torah and when we absorb Torah knowledge, it fundamentally changes us. It fundamentally enhances us. It changes not only our inside, but it changes our outside. As Rabbi say, the most beautiful thing is it changes the way we present to the world. We look different to the world when we're steeped in Torah. Truly beautiful. Amr Leahu Tzduki Rabbi Huda. So I'll say one more story about this. There was a Tzduki that said to Rabbi Huda, Panecha domin ikimalave ribis ikimegadle chazirin. You look like a person either who lends with interest or raises pigs. Okay, what does that mean? So I'll say, so interestingly enough, so once again, I just want to point out, all three of these stories are all the same story of Rabbi Yehuda's beautiful complexion. The first is story with Rabbi Yehuda, with Rabbi Tarfon. The second is a story with the Roman noblewoman, and then the third is the story ultimately again with this Tzeduki, with this non-believing Jew. So I will say, so again, there's much to say about why the Gemara is bringing down three stories of this. We're not going to get into this now only because we have more to do, but I'm just giving you a maramakum to think about. So this Tzeduki said to Rabbi Yehuda, you have a beautiful shiny countenance. Now he said you must either be lending with interest or ultimately again raising chazirim. So I'll say if you take a look at the Ran again, the Ran says, Kimagadle chazirim shemitoch shem ravichin harbe pneim suvim. Apparently, these are considered to be easy professions in which you can make a lot of money with very little effort. A lot of money and very little effort. So the idea is you have more time for self-pampering if you have these professions. So the Tzeduki said to Rabbi Yehuda, ultimately again, you look like someone who's had a relaxed life, very wealthy, very well taken care of. You must either be lending with interest or raising chazirim. So Rabbi Yehuda responds, for Jews, both of these things are asur, right? A Jew can't raise pigs, and a Jew is also not permitted to lend with interest. So Ella, so what do I attribute my countenance to? Ella Esrim is very interesting. Ella Esrim v'arba beis hakisei islim in beis habei midrasha. There are 24 restrooms between my house and the beis medrash. And every hour I go into each of them. Now, of course, this is a bit hyperbolic. What Rabbi Yehuda was saying is essentially my gastrointestinal affairs are an issue, are in order. In other words, I take care of myself, I relieve myself regularly, and because of that, my body is healthy. So I will say, so it's interesting, by the way, how in stories 1 and 3, Rabbi Yehuda attributes his countenance, his beautiful countenance, to his physical health, to taking care of his physical needs. In story 2, he attributes his physical countenance ultimately again to his spiritual health. And it could very well be that ultimately the stories kind of round out as Rabbi Yehuda is saying, what you see as a total and healthy person is a composite ultimately of me taking care of my body and me taking care of my soul. Quite beautiful. So Rabbi Yehuda, incredible story. Rabbi Yehuda, when he go to the beis medrash, shakil gulfa al kasvei. He would take a gulfa. The Ran says over here, gulfa is kankan, a jug or a basket. A basket. Now, why would he bring the basket? For him to sit on. In other words, he was bringing his own chair to the beis medrash. So Amar Gidol Malacha shemechabedes as ba'aleha. So what says, this is interesting because people say, Rabbi Yehuda, why are you bringing your own chair? Right? In other words, someone else could carry your chair. He said, no, it's good for me to carry my chair. Why? Because malacha is good. It brings honor ultimately again to Ba'ala, to those who perform it. Now, I both say it's interesting that it could also very well be that what Rabbi Yehuda is showing is in order to be accomplished in Torah and in order to gain something from the experience of learning, you have to exert yourself in some way. There has to be some level of exertion. Torah can't be easy. I remember, I think I mentioned this before. I'll tell you later. So again, so the idea over here is Rabbi Yehuda felt if I'm going to be Kona Torah, then at the end of the day, I have to exert myself in some way. So what did he do? He carried. I will say it's such an incredible idea because right, we live in an age where the goal is what? The goal is to make everything easy, right? And there's certainly positive aspects to that, right? In other words, I'm not suggesting we all become Amish, but Lamaisa, again, there's something that's lost in making everything easy, in that recognizing part of growth, especially in Ruchnius, is the exertion, is the struggle. Well, so we even know part of the beauty of what we're able to do here every morning is there's incredible exertion getting up this hour in the morning, right? It would be so much better if the shir was 2 hours later. How great would that be, right? Sleep to a normal hour, get up, start your day. Part of the growth ultimately is the exertion. Part of the growth of Rabbi Yehuda ultimately is what? Is lifting up the basket and bringing it with him to shir. Incredible. Rabbi Shimon, shakel tzana al kasvei. Same idea about Rabbi Shimon used to take a basket on his shoulder. Amr gidol malacha shemechabed says ba'aleha. Tvisu Rabbi Yehuda. Let's listen to this. So going back to Rabbi Yehuda now. The wife of Rabbi Yehuda, Nafkis, she went out, Naktas Amra of the Galima de Hotvi. Supposed to listen to this. Rabbi Yehuda was very poor. The Gemara now tells us about how incredible and how intense his poverty was. What happened? His wife went out to the marketplace. And what did she do? She bought wool. She bought some wool, and she made the wool into a cloak. Okay. Kadnafkis l'shuka, michsibe. The kadnafik Rabbi Yehuda l'tzelu yahavi michse. Umatzli. The kad michsibe. I'm sorry, good. So what happened? They had one cloak, and they were so poor that Rabbi Yehuda and his wife shared the cloak. When she would go out to the marketplace, she would wear the cloak. When he would ultimately go out to daven or to learn, he would wear the cloak. And kad michsibe, when he would put on the cloak, hav mavarich, he would make a bracha, baruch sha'atani me'il. Right? Thank you, Hashem. Blessed are you, Hashem, who has literally, again, wrapped me in a coat. I would say, what an incredible idea here. Their husband and wife are sharing a coat, are sharing a cloak, right? Yet, Rabbi Yehuda felt such a profound sense of gratitude for this cloak every single time he put it on that he made a bracha. I will say, isn't that incredible? Can you imagine, like, I think if I was in that situation and I was chas v'shalom so poor that I was sharing a coat with my wife, I don't know that I would feel a profound sense of gratitude every single time I put it on. In fact, if I know myself, I think I'd feel like a little bit like a shtickle resentment or a shtickle sadness. Like this is what I have in life. Right? This is what I have in life. All I have in life is one shared coat. I don't know that I'd be filled with an overwhelming sense of gratitude towards HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Yet Rabbi Yehuda, every single time he put on that coat, he made a bracha. It's so incredible. So we'll say, now watch the story. So the Gemara says, Zimna Chada, Gaz Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Tanisa. One time, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel decreed a fast day. I must say the Gemara doesn't tell us why there was a fast day, but he decreed a fast day, a public fast day. Rabbi Yehuda lo asla beit Tanisa. Rabbi Yehuda was missing from the gathering, right? Because remember, again, on fast days, they would hold communal prayer. Rabbi Yehuda did not show up. He wasn't there. So Amrin Lady, so Rabbi Shimon Gamliel was looking for Rabbi Yehuda. They said to Shimon Gamliel, lo is le kisuye. You know, Rabbi Yehuda is not here. He doesn't have clothing. It must be that he's probably not here because his wife probably was out. She had the coat, and that's why he's not here. Shadar le glima. So Rabbi Shimon Gamliel sent Rabbi Yehuda a cloak. Sent him a cloak. Velo kabel. So Rabbi Yehuda wouldn't accept it. Tap of nun. Dalit sifsa. So again, the messenger who came, here's what's interesting. Rabbi Yehuda didn't want to offend Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. After Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, first of all, who's the Nasi, is going ahead and sending him a gift. He didn't want to look like an ingrate, right? He didn't want to look like, except, even though, again, it's interesting how Chazal speak about the dangers of gifts, but at the same time, part of life is learning how to accept gifts graciously, even if you're uncomfortable with it, especially when it comes from someone who's very chashuv. So here, Rabbi Yehuda doesn't want to accept the gift. So what does he do? Listen to this. Top of Nun 50a, Dal Tzifsa. So apparently Rabbi Yehuda was sitting like on a mat. He pulled up the mat. Va'amar l'shlucha chazi my ika. Look what I have. Now, both say, the Ran points out over here that a miracle occurred, and like a chest of gold coins appeared underneath the mat. So Rabbi Yehuda was saying to the Shaliach, please understand, I could buy my own cloak. Right? So in other words, it's not the pshat that I don't have the money. So why don't I have a cloak? Let's listen to this. Miu, lo nichali de ishani bahadein alma. I choose ultimately, again, to abstain from not enjoying, I choose to abstain from non-essential pleasures in this world. I will say, by the way, What an incredible overlap between our two limudim, right? We're just learning about prishos. So what is Rabbi Yehuda saying essentially? I practice prishos. Now both say, this is what Ramchal would call more extreme prishos. For Rabbi Yehuda, this is what he felt. So Rabbi Yehuda says, I made a conscious decision that I don't need to benefit from non-essential things in this world. If Rabbi Yehuda says, for my wife and I, it's working out. It's working out. Maybe it's even good for our shalom bayis, right? This brought us closer. We're sharing a coat. Rabbi Yehuda says, I don't need it. Thank you. Please, tell Rabbi Shmuel, thank you so much, but I don't need the coat. I will say, absolutely incredible. So to me, again, what's so striking about this story is, you see, you read this story, and what's our reaction to this story? Nebuch, Rabbi Yehuda was so poor. Yet if you ask Rabbi Yehuda, how are things going? Rabbi Yehuda would have said, just fine. I have exactly what I need. Everything is good. Not only that, I put on that cloak and I feel such a sense of gratitude. Baruch Sha'atani Mi'il. I feel such a sense of gratitude that Akash Baruch Hu has given me this cloak that I share together with my wife. So I'll say, absolutely incredible about how much perspective frames how we are living our lives and what is going on in life. Absolutely incredible. I will say, now we come to the beautiful, beautiful story of Rabbi Akiva. So we'll say, so remember again, the primary story of Rabbi Akiva is brought down in Maseches Ksuvas. Right? That's the primary location of that story. In fact, again, you can see the Mesoras Hashas puts you by Ksuvas Samech Beis Amar Beis 62b. Remember again, the story of Rabbi Akiva is immediately followed by the story of the death of Rabbi Akiva's students. That's the primary Gemara. It's not a secondary story. What this is a little bit of a different angle on the same Rabbi Akiva story. So watch this. Rabbi Akiva is Kaddish Slay Barte de Kalba Savua. Shabbos says, listen to this. Rabbi Akiva married the daughter of Kalba Savua. Now, remember again, we know Kalba Savua from Maseches Tainis. Right? Kalba Savua was one of the three wealthiest men of Yerushalayim. He was called Kalba Savua. Right? Remember again, Kalba Savua literally translates as the satiated dog. Right? Not amongst the most popular children's names. Right? So I'll say, so why is he called the satiated dog? The Gemara says, because even if you were as hungry and ravenous as a starving dog, if you came into his home, he would feed you. He was known as such an incredible Baal Chesed, such an incredible Baal Tzedakah. So what happens? Rabbi Akiva becomes Mikudeshes, or is Mekadesh, Kalba Savua's daughter. So also remember again, if you'll notice, this Gemara leaves off the first part of the story, right? How did this shidduch exactly occur? So remember again, Maseches Ksuvas, that's where it says that the daughter of Kalba Savua, a young woman by the name of Rachel, sees that Rabbi Akiva was ma'ali. He had good midos. She saw, so the Gemara here doesn't talk about that. The Gemara just tells us, kind of jumping to the middle of the story, right? They do Kiddushin. Shama Kalba Savua, Adra Hana Mikol Nechase. Kalba Savua hears about this, and he is infuriated. Absolutely infuriated. So what does he do? He makes a neder preventing his daughter from getting any benefit from his property. Now understand, what was Kalba Savua's intent? Kalba Savua's intent was for them to get divorced. Remember again, right now, in the Gemara story, there was only Kiddushin. There wasn't Nisuin. So the hope was that she'll hear the neder, say, oh my gosh, my father's cutting me off. I'm going to have no money. She obviously had a pampered lifestyle. So the Maisa, again, he was hoping that the neder would cause her to dissolve the marriage. Okay, so what happened? Azla, this nasiba le besisva. So we'll say, so what happened? So they got married. Didn't help, the neder didn't help, and Rabbi Akiva and Rachel got married that winter. Listen to how beautiful this story is. Havuganu Beit Tivna. Akiva and Rachel were so poor that they were living in a straw hut. When I say straw hut, in a hut in which they store straw, right? In a storage room, they were living in a storage space, right? A storage space for straw. So listen to how beautiful this is. So have a kamankit le tivna min mazeh. So I'll say, so remember again, they were sleeping literally again in the straw. So I'll say, so every single morning, Rabbi Akiva, I guess then he was still Akiva then, right? Akiva would pick the straw out of his wife's hair. I will say, what just an amazing image, right? He would pick the straw out of his wife's hair. Amarla, he said to her, Ihava li ramina lech Yerushalayim didava. He said, if I had money, I would buy you a Yerushalayim Shel Zahav. Right? What does it mean? Not Naomi Shefer as Yerushalayim Shel Zahav. Right? I will say. So what does it mean that? So if you look at the Ran says over here, Amina Lach Yerushalayim Didava Tachshit Zav Yerushalayim Sheba. So apparently it was common for the women to have like a piece of jewelry that had like the skyline of Yerushalayim on it. This was a common adornment, a tachshit, a golden adornment that had Yerushalayim engraved on it. So Rabbi Akiva says to his wife, if I had money, I would buy Yerushalayim. So you have to understand how beautiful and magnificent that exchange is. It's Rabbi Akiva in that moment recognizing what his wife has sacrificed for him. Literally, again, she's the daughter of one of the wealthiest men in Yerushalayim. And now she's sleeping in straw. He's literally picking the straw out of her hair. And he realizes in that moment, this lady has given up everything for me. He's given up everything for me. And he says to her, what I wouldn't give to be able to buy you something beautiful. Such a magnificent exchange. Ase Eliyahu, so I'll say what happened in that moment. Eliyahu came along. Idmi la'an ke'anasha. So I'll say Eliyahu Navi came, disguised as a regular guy, knocked on the door. Amr lahu, havili porta de tivna. Can I borrow some straw from you? Dialaret is to see my wife has given birth. Veles li midam la'aguna. And I have nothing for her to lay down on. So we'll say, see what's happening over here. So Eliyahu comes disguised as a regular guy, knocks on the door. Mazel tov, my wife gave birth. I'm sorry, we're so poor and destitute that we don't even have some straw to light. Can I borrow some straw? So in that moment, Amar Rabbi Akiva le'insa say, Chazi garva dafilu tivna lo islay. So we'll say, listen to this. Rabbi Akiva said to us, if you see, I guess we're fortunate. At least we have straw. There are people that don't even have straw. So we'll say, it's this incredible thing that's happening over here. You see, in that moment, Rabbi Akiva is lamenting their dire financial circumstances. And he's saying, I wish that we had more. I wish that we had more. And it's almost as if that he's getting down over their circumstances. So we'll say, so what happens in that moment? Rabbi Akiva is on a trajectory that he doesn't even realize that he's on. So Eliyahu Navi comes, Rabbi say, now, just understand, Eliyahu Navi doesn't just pop in. Right? It doesn't just pop in. Eliyahu Navi is called upon to pop in when he needs to direct things in a certain way. So Eliyahu Navi pops in that moment to redirect. And what happens? He says, we don't even have straw. And Rabbi Akiva closes the door after this interaction with a guy who he's just a regular guy. What does he realize? There are people who have less than us. And if there are people who have less than us, then what does that tell you? We're okay. There are people who are less fortunate. So by definition, we are doing just fine. I will say, and this was incredibly important. This was incredibly important because it kept Rabbi Akiva on the trajectory that he was yet unaware of. But I will say, but it's an incredible idea in general in life, how sometimes, we all lack something. And sometimes we feel that the thing that we lack is just so crucial to my life success that I don't know how I'm going to be able to succeed without it. It's important sometimes to have a little bit of context or a little bit of reframing and recognize that whatever it is you're lacking, there are people who have less than you and are still making it through life, are still accomplishing. So it's true, I may be lacking something, but that which I am lacking should not derail me from dynamic life accomplishment. So let's say, here we go. So the Gemara goes right there. So Amrle Zil Havi Bei Rab. So at this point, so Rachel says to her husband, go to yeshiva. So again, remember, we often think that Rabbi Akiva or Akiva going away to yeshiva was like a precondition to marriage. Apparently, that wasn't it. They were already married. And again, they're living in dire poverty. So Rachel says to her husband, go to yeshiva. Go to yeshiva, you have to learn. So Amrle, Zil Havi Beirav. Azul Tarti Srishni, Kamid Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua. So Rabbi Akiva went off and he learned 12 years. She said, go to yeshiva. He's gone for 12 years. He's learning before Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua. Lemishlam Tarti Srishnin, at the end of 12 years, Ka'asa Lebeisei. Rabbi Akiva now is coming back home. Shama min achore Beisei. as he was approaching his house, he heard a conversation happening on the backside of his house, right at the back of his house. One Rasha, one very evil person, was saying to Rabbi Akiva's wife, to Rachel, Shapir avid le'avuch. You know what? Your father did a good thing. It was good that your father made a neder precluding you from getting any benefit from his property. Chada telo damilech. First of all, you married a bum, right? That guy Akiva, right? He's a bum. Heno, he's a bum, right? In other words, he's not an equal to you. V'od shafkech armelos chayus. He left you as a living widow, kulon shnin. All of these years. So Rabbi Akiva overhears this conversation happening between the Shabbos. By the way, it's pretty dramatic. It's pretty dramatic that the Gemara calls this guy a Rasha. I was saying, you see something amazing. Sometimes, what's the definition of a Rasha? A Rasha is someone who makes a person feel bad about something they cannot change. Right? It's always like an interesting idea about it. We all have interactions like this. I've done something wrong. I made a mistake. I can't do anything about it. The worst thing you could do is make a person feel even worse about something they cannot change. There's this concept of constructive critique, constructive musar, where you can help a person grow. Sometimes I can't change what's done. To beat a person over the head, right, metaphorically, like verbally, for saying they cannot change, that's rishus. What is this guy trying to accomplish? What are you trying to do? What are you trying to do? Rachel is living in poverty. Her husband's been gone for 12 years. Her father won't talk with her. She's destitute. She has no money. What are you trying to accomplish? So can you imagine this conversation? Rachel, you deserve it. You deserve it. Everything that's happening, your father was... What are you doing? What are you doing? I will say, sometimes you have to say something sharp to a person in order to motivate them, in order to lift them up, in order to get them to move. But to say something to a person that just makes them feel worse about circumstances they cannot change, that's rishos. That's evil. So I'll say, so what happens? So Rachel responds, Amar lei, itzais lidili, if my husband would listen to me, so they have a tarti srin ashni and achrenaisa. I'm okay if he goes back to yeshiva for another 12 years. Little did she know that Rabbi Akiva was listening on the other side of the house. Amar, hawil v'yahavis li reshusa, ihadra la'achore. So Rabbi Akiva says, ultimately again, since I now have her permission, he went back. Now I will say, the chap over here is what? He went back without even going home. Hadra azal havitarti srishni achranaisa. He goes back to yeshiva for another 12 years. I will say, if you remember again, in Maseches Ksubis, when we did this sugya, there is a beautifully popular, well-known piece by Chaim Shmuel Silber in Sichos Musar. And what's Chaim Shmuel Silber say? I will say, Rabbi Akiva, why can't you stop at home? Have a cup of coffee, have a Danish, right? Say a shalom aleichem, right? See your wife, you haven't seen her for 12 years. And Chaim Shmuel Silber says something so beautiful. He says, because 12 plus 12 doesn't equal 24. The greatness of Rabbi Akiva is about saying what we call a concept of ritzifos. Ritzifos means uninterrupted learning. Greatness in Torah comes from when you plug away at something in an uninterrupted fashion. Rabbi Akiva understood that right now, had he gone home, and I will say this obviously is not to be mimicked, right, in this sense, but had he gone home, it would have interrupted the flow and interrupted the energy and interrupted the continuity of his learning. I will say, by the way, you should know, now it's a big thing that they're bringing back in yeshivas, the concept of ritzifos. My boys were telling me about this, and I've heard about it actually from which is encouraging boys in yeshiva to have a seder of uninterrupted learning. Whatever amount of time it is, 30 minutes, an hour, 20 minutes. I both said, by the way, it's something that's very powerful to institute within our own lives as well. To be makabel upon oneself for X amount of time, I'm learning uninterrupted. It could be 10 minutes. Whatever it is, for this amount of time, I'm not talking to anyone. I'm not taking a phone call. I'm not checking my email. For whatever, ritzifos, for a certain amount of time, I am in this, and I'm not going to undistracted, uninterrupted learning. Rabbi Akiva understood that's where real growth comes from. Because I'll say, you know this, you could sit and do something for 2 hours. They'll say, but what happens if I'm distracted or I'm doing different things? How much quality time do you actually get out of that 2 hours? Whatever, an hour, 45 minutes, 20 minutes. We all know this is my sim b'chol yom, but something done b'ritzifos, something done with uninterrupted intensity, That's powerful. So Rabbi Akiva understood that at the end of the day, greatness in Torah is not simply a function of time. It's a function of continuous, uninterrupted time. So 12 plus 12 doesn't equal 24. You know what equals 24? You know what equals 24? 24 equals 24, right? 24 years of uninterrupted learning. That's what creates a Rabbi Akiva. It's incredible. So I'll say, so what happens? So I'll say, what happens? So the Gemara says, so he comes back. Asa, after 24 years of being gone, he comes back with 24,000 pairs of students. 24,000 pairs of students. Asa be'esrin v'arba alfen zugi, tamidi. Nafa kuli amaliyape. Everyone wanted to now greet Rabbi Akiva. V'af hi kama. Rachel also came to greet her husband. So the same Russia, the same guy said to her, Va'at lehecha, where are you going? Listen to this exchange. Can you imagine talking to a human being this way, right? Where are you going? Amrale. So now, according to the Ran, what he was saying to her is, where are you going dressed like that? Right? In other words, she understands why she's going, but put something on. Right? Put on regular clothing. Amrale, she said to him, Yodea tzadik nefesh behemto, which I will say literally means that tzaddik knows the nefesh, the soul of his animal. And I will say, if you take a look at the Ran again says, Yodea huzeh shenitzta'arti bishvilo. My husband knows that if I look this way, it's because of him. Now, to clarify that, right? In other words, he understands that all the tsar I've gone through in life, ultimately, again, is to allow him to become great. I will say, it's just such a story of self-sacrifice within a marriage. So she says, I'm not changing my clothing. I'm not going to pretend to look all beautiful and all put together when life has not been beautiful and things have not been put together. The most beautiful way I could present to my husband is a real picture of how I am, which is a state of difficulty, pain, and deprivation. But all of that was for him. So listen to this. Kamat Chani Rabbanan. Everybody was pushing to get a view of Rabbi Akiva. Amr Lahon. So what happened? Kamat Chani Rabbanan. Sorry. So the rabbis were pushing her away. People didn't know who she was. They didn't know who she was. So they see this woman, right? Probably again in tattered clothing. They see this woman going ahead and pushing away towards Rabbi Akiva. They push her away. Amr Lahon. Rabbi Akiva said to them, Hanichula, leave her alone. Shali v'shalachem shalahi. How incredibly beautiful. Rabbi Akiva says, do you know who she is? Do you know who she is? Everything I have and everything all of you have are only because of her Mesiras Nefesh. An incredible story. Shama, Kalba Savua. So Kalba Savua comes. So now he hears that the son-in-law that he once thought was just like an Eisvarf, right? That this guy is a nothing. This guy is worse than a nothing. Now is Rabbi Akiva. Asa ve'itshal al nidre. Ultimately, again, he went ahead. I will say, by the way, this is also why the story is. This is why the story is repeated here, because there's a neder. So Kalba Savua revokes his neder. The Ashtariye Ishtire. And ultimately, again, he was permitted now to share his wealth with Rabbi Akiva. So we'll say just an incredibly overwhelming story, incredible story about sacrifice in marriage, an incredible story that the essence of marriage ultimately, again, is one spouse giving for the success of the other. I will say, isn't that what marriage is all about? A synergistic partnership where each is willing to sacrifice so that the other has the ability to actualize their greatness. That's what marriage is. Mutual sacrifice for mutual actualization. Incredible. Minshis, the Gemara says now, now watch this. Minshis mili, ita Rabbi Akiva, right? Rabbi Akiva became wealthy. Akiva became wealthy, right? He became wealthy ultimately, again, from 6 different sources. Watch this. Min kalba savua. So firstly, he became rich because now, again, his father-in-law. It's always good to have a shver, right? He has a father-in-law now who's very wealthy, right? Who now was able to go ahead and give him money. Min ila disafinta. Now, I'll say this is actually very interesting. Ila disafinta literally means the deer of the boat. Now, what does that mean? Dechosafinta avdin le min ina. So chad and ashua al kaf yaba. Asu ashkecher. Listen to this. So apparently, the Ran explains. Let's say this outside. The Ran explains this that it was very common for a boat to have like a deer head on its not mast, but like on its bow, on the front of the boat. This was supposed to be a good simon of mazel, meaning what? just like the deer runs very quickly, so the boat should have a good passage, a good journey. Now they would often fill this deer head with gold coins. So Rabbi Akiva one time found a deer head on the dock. One time they forgot the deer head on the dock. It was filled with gold coins. Rabbi Akiva got it. So ultimately, again, the Ran explains over here. The Maharsha explains over here that Rabbi Akiva found it. He wanted to return it to the sailors, but the sailors were so impressed with Rabbi Akiva's honesty, they let him keep it. Okay, so source of wealth 1 was Kala Savua. Source of wealth 2, he found the deer head. Min Gavza. Listen to this. Another time where it happens. Gavza means a chest, a box. What happened with the box? One time, Rabbi Akiva gave, there were people, there were sailors going overseas. And also, when sailors went overseas, they had opportunity for commerce. Rabbi Akiva goes ahead and gives 4 zuz, right, to the sailors. And what does he say to the sailors? Bring me something back. Right? Again, it's not a lot of money. So just give me, here's 4 zuz, bring me something back. So we'll say the sailors weren't able to find anything back. One thing that they were able to find was a box. So they brought him back a box, and they gave him the box. Amrulay avud marna ale. So we'll say, so ultimately, again, they said to him here, use this. Right? So they said, look, we couldn't find anything to buy for you. What are you going to buy for 4 zuz? We couldn't even find anything. Instead, again, we just go ahead and we found you a box. So ishtachach dahave mili dinari. So one time they found that. So what happened? Rabbi Akiva opened the box, and it turned out that the box was filled with gold coins. So ultimately, again, the Gemara says, Male dinari. Tizimna chada taves sfina, v'chol iska hava machis bahu gavza, v'ishtachach bahu zimna demin desakriusa. So I say, so what happens? So again, it's apparently the Gemara says, somebody must have lost. In other words, the Gemara tells a story. How the Gemara exactly knows that this is the chest, but the Gemara says it must have been people were on the high seas doing commerce. They put all of the proceeds of their business transactions in this chest. The boat sank. This chest washed up on the shore, and this was the chest of Rabbi Akiva. Incredible. Suppose I say so again. For 4 zuz, a pretty good return on investment. For 4 zuz, ultimately again he gets this chest of gold coins. So we'll say that's another source of his wealth. Umin matronisa. We'll say the other story ultimately again was with a Roman noblewoman. So we'll say, now listen to this. Here, the Gemara does not go ahead and expand on this story. But if you take a quick look at the Ran, I will say all of these are incredible stories. Look at this. Pam Achos, the last Ran on the page, left-hand side, left-hand column. Pam Achos, Hutzruchu Rabbi Akiva v'Talmid of Maus. One time Rabbi Akiva and his students needed money. And what happened? V'holchu eitzel matronisa. They went to a certain Roman noblewoman for a loan. Amru lo Rabbi Akiva, harini melava oscha, v'tia ata love, v'HaKadosh Baruch Hu v'yam arevim b'davar. So this Roman noblewoman who had incredible respect to Rabbi Akiva, she said, I'll lend you the money, you're the borrower, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the sea should be the guarantors for this debt. Kavala zman lepiran, they set a time for repayment. Ukishegia zmana halcha osa matronisa asvas hayam. So the Rabbi says, see now what happened? The time for repayment came. Now what the Ran doesn't say explicitly over is Rabbi Akiva was sick. He was ill, and therefore he was unable to come to repay her. So what happens? She goes to the sea. She says, sea, you owe me, you're the guarantor for this debt. Right, what happens? Again, so the Ran says, Rabbi Akiva is ill. He doesn't have the ability to repay the debt. You and the sea are the guarantors. Miyad. Nishtatis pito shal keser v'natla argos malei avanim tovos v'dinar zav v'zarko l'soch hayam. So also listen to this. So the Ran says where the story is, in that very moment, at another part of the sea, the daughter of the Caesar went a little crazy. She took a box of jewels, a chest of jewels and money, threw it into the sea. That chest of money and jewels washes up on the shore, right by where this Roman noblewoman was, thereby paying the debt of Rabbi Akiva. A little while later, Rabbi Akiva is healed. He comes to pay his debt, and the Roman noblewoman says, your debt has already been paid. And I will say from that, Rabbi Akiva was able to keep that money. Therefore, again, that was another source of his wealth. Amud Beis. So I will say, Umin Ishto shel Turnus Rufus. Another source of his wealth was from the wife of Turnus Rufus. So I will say, ultimately, again, it's so many incredible stories. Who's the wife, or what's the wife of Turnus Rufus? So once again, I will say, the Ran tells this story very quickly. Look, top Ran, Nunam Beis, Rabbi Akiva mekapcho bekarai lifnei Kesar, or mekantro b'dam. So let me say this outside. Rabbi Akiva and Turnus Rufus were constantly locked in like theological debate, and Rabbi Akiva was always besting Turnus Rufus in front of the Caesar. Turnus Rufus came home. Pam achas bala beso sarvizov. One time Turnus Rufus comes home. He's angry. Amr lo ishta mipnei ma panachazov. And why are you angry? Amr lo mipnei Rabbi Akiva shemekanter osi b'chol yom b'dvarim. Rabbi Akiva is always besting me in front of the Caesar. Amr lo. So listen to this. His wife said, Eloheihem shal elu sonazima. You know, their God hates immorality. Tein li rishus. It's a crazy story. So Mrs. Turnus Rufus says to her husband, if you give me permission, I will seduce Rabbi Akiva to sin, and he'll lose his spiritual edge over you. Turnus Rufus says, okay. Nasan la rashus v'niskashta v'halchala. Eita Rabbi Akiva. So sure enough, he gives her a shush, she comes to Rabbi Akiva. Kishara Rabbi Akiva also sachak bacha. Rak sachal gubas. Rabbi Akiva saw her. He spit, he laughed, and he cried. So she's very taken by this. Amar lo, ma inon hanach tlasmili. What are you doing? What are you doing? Amar lo shnaim efarish shlishi lo elo efarish. I'll explain to you two of the three. Rakakti al shebasa mitipas rucha. Right? I spit because, you know, we all come from a putrid drop, and we go back to a putrid drop. Bachisi, I cried because you're such a beautiful woman. Ahai shofra. And that beauty that you possess one day will disintegrate into the earth. Now, I'll say, why did he laugh? Now, this Rabbi Akiva didn't reveal. He laughed. I will say he laughed because one day, after the death of Turnus Rufus, this woman would convert and she would marry Rabbi Akiva. He saw prophetically that one day they would in fact be husband and wife. That last part, ultimately, again, he did not reveal to her. There's actually alternate versions of the story is that he did reveal it to her. But again, I will say, according to this approach, he did not reveal it to her. Now, I will say, she is so taken by this. Amra lo, klum yesh tshuva. I will say, she understands here, well, she came ready to seduce this man. Right? Meanwhile, she realizes that he is so incredibly holy and pious. So she said, is there any tshuva for a person like me? And he says to Amr Lahain, he says, of course, tshuva is open to everyone. Now, both say, he does not tell her what the tshuva is. She goes on her own, halcha v'niskaira v'nisesol Rabbi Akiva. She goes and converts and ultimately marries Rabbi Akiva. V'chnisalo mamon harbe. Now, she was a wealthy woman. She brought in the money into this marriage. So we'll say, what I want to point out over here is, again, these things didn't occur immediately, because according to the story, she only marries Rabbi Akiva after Turnus Rufus dies. The idea is he sparked something within her. This encounter with Rabbi Akiva was the beginning of her spiritual journey, which ultimately resulted in her marriage to Rabbi Akiva. I'll just point out historically, which is actually something fascinating. Rabbi Akiva is one of the Asar Rugi Malchus, one of the 10 martyrs. In Chazal, it's indicated that the Roman official that executed Rabbi Akiva was Turnus Rufus. Yet it says Rabbi Akiva married the widow of Turnus Rufus. So it's quite possible that Turnus Rufus is not the name of a person, but rather Turnus Rufus is the name of a position, kind of like Caesar, right? Caesar is not the name of a person, it's the name of a position. So Turnus Rufus might also be the name of a high Roman official. Okay, in any event, that was a source of his wealth. Umin Ketia Bar Shalom. And I will say ultimately again, and another source of Rabbi Akiva's wealth, ultimately again was Ketia Bar Shalom, which the Gemara says ultimately is a story in Maseches Avodah Zarah. Good. So we'll say, so these are the sources of Rabbi Akiva's wealth. I will say, by the way, it's also such an incredible idea. So now, by the way, I just want to point out, you see the incredible circle of Rabbi Akiva's life. So we go from being a newlywed, picking the straw out of your wife's hair, right, to having absolutely nothing, to encountering a life of incredible wealth. The full circle of Rabbi Akiva, not just in Gashmias Rabbosai, but the full circle of Rabbi Akiva in Ruchnias as well. Incredible. Let's go weiter. Rabbi Gamda, Yoiv Dalit Zuzi L'Safonoi, V'la'asuye B'homedam. Supposed to say, so what happens? Rav Gamda gave 4 zuz to the sailors to bring him back some merchandise. So I will say the truth is he heard about Rabbi Akiva's ROI, right? Rabbi Akiva's just trying to invest. He's like, all right, this is a good idea. 4 zuz to the sailor. So I said, this is a great story. So what happened? Lo ashkechu. The sailors couldn't find anything back to give Rabbi Gamda. Asyua lay bahon kuva. So they brought him back a monkey. Right? I was like, can you imagine this? Rabbi Gamda, this should be like a monkey, right? What am I going to do with this? So I was like, so what happened? Listen to this. Ishtamit. So what happens? The monkey escapes. Now I will say the truth is this actually occurred even before they gave the monkey to Rabbi Gamda. So they bring the monkey back, right? As they bring the monkey back, the monkey escapes. Al lacharta. The monkey went into a hole. So they have to get the monkey. Chafru basrei. So they went ahead and they dug after the monkey. Achkechu deravi al margalaisa. So I'll say they found that the monkey had discovered buried treasure. Buried treasure. So I'll say, what did they do? I seen on lekul, and they gave Rav Gamda the entire buried treasure. Now the Ran points out over here, were the sailors obligated to give Rabbi Gamda the treasure? Absolutely not. But the sailors, you understand, sailors in general are religious people, right? Why? Because when you travel the seas and you recognize that you're just at the mercy of nature, you reach out. Not that they're necessarily monotheistic. They're more often than not polytheistic individuals, but they're very religious people. So they saw that obviously Rabbi Gamda's monkey was the one who found the treasure. This must be a simon that it really is his, and therefore they gave it to him, even though they weren't obligated to do so. Let's go back there. It was an incredible story. So the daughter of the Caesar said to Rabbi Shmuel ben Chananya, Torah mefu'ara b'kli mechuar. This is quite an exchange. She says to him, how could Torah, something that's so beautiful, be in such an ugly vessel? Apparently, she was saying to Rabbi Shmuel ben Chananya, you are ugly. You are ugly. And she did not mince words. She says, so how could it be that such beautiful knowledge could be housed in such an ugly utensil? Amrle, limdi mi beis avuch. I'll teach you a lesson from your father's home. Tell me, in your father's house, in what do they keep the wine? Amrle, b'mani de pachra. We keep the wine in earthenware utensils. Amrle kuli alma bepachda. Ve'asun b'mani de pachda asun achisun b'mani de kasav dava. She said again, everyone, regular people, keep their wine in earthenware utensils. Don't you think that again, your family, the royalty, the Caesar, should keep his wine in gold and silver utensils, gold and silver vessels? So she said, you know what, you're right. She ordered the servants to move all of the wine from earthenware to gold and silver, and ultimately it all spoiled. Amrale af oraisa kain. So he taught her a very powerful lesson, that sometimes the most beautiful things are preserved when they are in very base and very, very humble utensils. Wine is only preserved when it's kept in earthenware. So Rabbi Shimon Chananya says sometimes the way that beautiful Torah is preserved is in a humble vessel. And Rabbi Shimon Chananya said the fact that I'm not the best looking guy by definition keeps me humble, and that humility ultimately is what preserves the Torah inside. We'll have to stop over here for today. Do not worry, we are right on schedule, right? We are just fine. I will say again, more incredible Agada to Gemara tomorrow. By tomorrow, by Shabbos, Miras Hashem, we will, because you'll see Friday's daf. Friday's daf is very short. Miras Hashem will be all caught up. What a daf. What a daf. We had